If you've never heard of the Legacy of Kain series or aren't a fan, I'm about to put you onto one of the greatest video game series you've never heard of. And if you are a fan of the Legacy of Kain, then welcome. Me and you are automatically friends now.
Did we just become best friends?
Yup! What series do you know in video games that can disappear for 20 years and still be relevant decades later amongst its whole fan base? Go ahead, I'll wait.
1 hour later.
When you think of franchises with the deepest lore, where does your mind go? I think most people would think of something like Dark Souls or the Elder Scrolls series, but I'll tell you right now, no game has a more twisted, complicated, and beautiful lore as the Legacy of Kain series. And that, amongst a few other key factors, are why fans like myself never let the series die, and why I think it's being primed for a big resurgence, and why even if you're not a fan of the series, this should matter to you, because I'll explain why what's happening with Legacy of Kain right now could easily happen with your favorite forgotten franchise too. Legacy of Kain is one of the strangest franchises in gaming history because it didn't die from lack of interest. The games were respected, the fan base stayed loyal, and over the years, there were multiple attempts to bring the series back, but somehow none of them ever made it across the finish line. I could do an entire video on just the amount of canceled projects this series has had over the decades. It's actually insane. Legacy of Kain started out as Blood Omen, a small isometric action RPG where you played as the vampire Kain, and eventually was turned into something much different. A third-person action-adventure series featuring two of the most interesting characters ever created in gaming. Kain from the previous title and his new counterpart Raziel. Even if you've never played one of the games, you likely at least recognize one of the two main characters from their classic cover art or seeing them somewhere. I feel like once you see Raziel one time, he's pretty hard to forget. The series went on a great 5-game run before Amy Hennig, who was the lead writer and creative force behind the Soul Reaver games, she left Crystal Dynamics right around the time the final title, Defiance, was finishing development, and she went to go work at Naughty Dog, where she would later direct Uncharted, Drake's Fortune, and the rest of that series. After she left, the series never really found its footing again. There were attempts to continue it, including a direct sequel called Legacy of Kain: The Dark Prophecy, and years later a full reboot project called Legacy of Kain: Dead Son, but both were eventually canceled before they ever saw the light of day. So the stranger part about Legacy of Kain isn't that nobody tried to bring it back, it's that it kept almost coming back and somehow never quite did. And normally when something like that happens to a franchise, that's where the story ends. The games stop coming out, people move on, and eventually the series just fades into gaming history. But Legacy of Kain never really followed that pattern. Even with no new games coming out for years, the community around the series never really went quiet. Fans kept replaying the games, digging into the story, trying to piece together one of the most complicated timelines in gaming. Forums, comment sections, and entire discussions kept popping up over the years where people were still debating the lore and trying to make sense of everything that happened in Nosgoth. And if you've ever looked up Legacy of Kain on YouTube, you'll see it too. Massive deep dive videos trying to explain the timeline, the characters, and all the twists the series built over its 5 games. The kind of videos people only make when a world and story still have a serious grip on the audience. So even though the games themselves stopped coming out, the conversation around them never really stopped. And eventually, after enough time passed and enough people kept asking about it, something finally started to change. Now, if you've never played these games, you might be wondering why this series managed to stick with people for so long in the first place. Because Legacy of Kain wasn't just another action game from that era. A lot of games in the late 90s and early 2000s focused entirely almost on gameplay first and story second. I wish AAA would do that nowadays, but anyways, I digress. Legacy of Kain flipped that around though. These games were built around the characters and the writing. Kain and Raziel are easily two of the most interesting characters gaming has ever produced. They're not heroes, they're not villains in the traditional sense either. They're complicated, they're flawed, and constantly caught in this cycle of manipulation, prophecy, and a fate that neither of them truly understands. And the way the games present that story is what really sets it apart. Most games deliver their story through quick cutscenes and simple dialogue. Legacy of Kain went in a completely different direction for its time. The writing is almost theatrical. Characters speak in this very deliberate, almost Shakespearean style that makes every conversation feel important. The performances behind those characters elevated it even further. The voice acting in these games is genuinely some of the best in the industry and some of the best voice acting I think that has ever been done in a video game, period. Michael Bell as Raziel and Simon Templeman as Kain don't just voice the characters, they completely own them. The way those two characters talk to each other throughout the series is a huge part of what made the story so memorable. Their back and forth is some of the best in any game ever.
You don't know where it is, do you?
No.
You never looked for it.
It doesn't matter, Raziel. Listen to me. You must understand that every creature is bound to one predestined path. We are all shackled.
To the wheel of fate. Believe me, I know that even better than you do.
All but one. Because of your remaking, you are the one unbound creature, the one among us all that truly has free will.
You think you have defeated me, Kain? It is not possible. I exist in places you cannot find.
And honestly, if you've never played these games, you might be thinking right now, okay, but what actually makes that story so special in the first place? Well, that's something that's easy to explain, but really quick first. If you're new to this channel, I just want to say welcome in. Thank you so much for choosing to spend your time with me. If you're not new, then welcome back. I truly appreciate you being here and being a part of this community that we're all building here together.
Is Raziel, his name is Kain. We are together once again.
And on this channel, we talk about the video game industry and video games, new or old, that I feel are important to the industry and that have a bigger story around them. And that's just what I like to do here. So a like or a sub or a comment can really help the video and the community grow. So if you want to leave a like at the comment or a comment at the end of this video, I'd really appreciate it. It'll definitely help everything out. Anyways, I appreciate that more than you know. Now let's move on with the video. Legacy of Kain built a narrative around time travel, destiny, manipulation, and free will. Characters are constantly questioning whether their actions are truly their own or if they're just playing roles in a much larger plan that was set in motion much longer before they even existed. The timeline of these games is famously complicated, but that complexity is also part of the appeal. Every new revelation changes how you look at the events that came before. The twists just aren't there for the sake of being twists. They feel like they're actual, oh my god, moments in the story. And all of that plays out in a world that feels completely unique. Nosgoth isn't some generic fantasy setting. It's dark, decaying, and full of history. You constantly get the sense that the world existed long before the events of the games and will continue to exist long after them. So when people say Legacy of Kain has some of the deepest lore in gaming, they're not exaggerating. It's a series built on strong characters, incredible performances, and a world that feels ancient and lived in, and a story that isn't afraid to get complicated. It really isn't afraid to get complicated. And when you combine all of those things together, it becomes a lot easier to understand why fans held on to this franchise for as long as they did. Because there really hasn't been anything quite like it since, in my opinion, and I genuinely can't think of a single game, new or old, that can match the voice acting, mystery, or even lore building and theatrics of this series. And for years, that's where the story of this franchise stayed. 5 incredible games, a fan base that refused to let it go, and a future that kind of never seemed to arrive but almost seemed like it just might. But after 2 decades of silence, Legacy of Kain has finally been moving again, and it came back through remasters, bringing 2 of the most beloved entries in the series to modern platforms and giving new players a chance to finally experience them for the first time. Then we had a little bit of a silent period, and again, Defiance followed not long after, finally bringing the last chapter of the original run back as well. So for a long time, fans of the series that already felt like, wow, this is kind of crazy that we're getting a remaster of Soul Reaver 1 and 2, were taken again back by seeing the 3rd game remastered, and with even more love and effort than went into the first original ones. These were games that many people assumed would just stay locked to older hardware forever. But the revival didn't even stop there. There was also a graphic novel that Kickstarter launched that explored more of the Legacy of Kain universe, and once again the community showed up immediately to support that in droves. And now, for the first time in decades, there's actually a brand new Legacy of Kain project on the way as well, which feels insane to say. A smaller pixel style game no less, but it's still set in the world of Nosgoth, and it still has all of our characters, and it's releasing later this month as of the recording of this video. And honestly, that last part might be the most interesting piece of the puzzle, because it opens up a much bigger conversation happening across the gaming industry right now. And what I mentioned at the top of the video about how we could see the same thing with Legacy of Kain happening to one of your favorite forgotten franchises coming back is something that I think can go around again. For a long time, it felt like the only way for a franchise to come back was through a massive AAA sequel or like a full-blown AAA reboot. But recently, we've started seeing companies realize that there's another way to do it. Instead of jumping straight into a giant budget project, studios are starting to test the waters with smaller AA games first. Castlevania is a perfect example of this. After years of being dormant, the series started coming back through smaller projects and experiments instead of huge AAA reboots right out the gate. And honestly, it's a really smart strategy. That new Castlevania looks awesome, but I guarantee you it didn't cost them $100 million to make. So this, as I said, lets companies find out if people still care about the franchise before committing hundreds of millions of dollars into bringing it back fully. And when you look at what's happening with Legacy of Kain right now, it really feels like that exact kind of situation. For me, that's kind of what makes this moment exciting, because for the first time in a really long time, Legacy of Kain doesn't just feel like some old franchise people remember from the early 2000s. It actually feels like something that might have a future again. And it feels like what it has done from going dormant to actually having a future again could be inspirational for other old dormant series and a pathway and kind of a blueprint for how they could also come back as well. A lot of old series just haven't come back because companies aren't willing to dump hundreds of millions of dollars into bringing that character back or bringing that reboot back or putting the marketing out to have that character become popular in the video game zeitgeist again. But something like this is an easy way that old franchises can come back. The remaster brought the games back. The graphic novel showed that the community is still here and still willing to support this world. And now there's even a brand new smaller game from Legacy of Kain. So for a series that spent more than 20 years basically frozen in time, I think that's a pretty big shift to happen in only a couple years. And if people show up for it, if new players discover these games, if the interest is still there, then suddenly the idea of a full new proper 3D Legacy of Kain game doesn't sound so crazy anymore. And honestly, I think that's why this whole thing matters, because Legacy of Kain might end up being proof that a franchise doesn't actually just die because it disappears for a while. Sometimes it just waits until the right moment to come back. And when you look at how loyal the fan base for this series has been all these years, maybe that comeback was only a matter of time after all. This series is really special to me. It's my favorite series of all time. When I played it when I was about 10 or 11 and played through the Soul Reaver game for the first time, it was the game that made me realize that video games could be more than just games. They could be a real experience. It made me realize why story is so important in games. It made me fall in love with vampires and gothic fantasy. It made me obsessed with the whole idea of time travel and free will. Legacy of Kain is one of those franchises that if you experience it young enough, it kind of shapes a part of who you are as a gamer, and it never really lets you forget it. And anybody that grew up with this franchise knows exactly what I'm talking about. If you're new to this series, I appreciate you listening to me talk about it, and I hope I've been able to show you why this franchise is not only important to me, but important to gaming as a whole. From its storytelling to its characters and world building, Legacy of Kain was doing a lot of things that games weren't doing or even attempting yet when it did it. And a lot of the developers who grew up playing these games went on to make some of the biggest franchises we have today. This series helped prove that stories in games could be deep, complicated, and worth paying attention to. And maybe that's exactly why Legacy of Kain really never disappeared, because when a story and a world stick with people that strongly, they don't just fade away when the games stop coming out. Fans keep talking about it, replaying it, introducing it to new players. That's my favorite thing to do. And keeping the conversation alive. And eventually, sometimes that passion actually brings the conversation back and actually brings the franchise back. And right now, it feels like Legacy of Kain might finally be getting that chance. A series that vanished for more than 20 years, suddenly alive again, because the fans never left. I just want to end this video off by saying I know there's been some contention around the new graphic novel, and a lot of fans aren't happy about the new character they've introduced or her role in the story, and that might make for some contention and drama around the new games. But for a series with such a loud fan base, I have full faith that the powers that be will make sure that they don't fully botch the comeback before it's even fully happened. And once my copy arrives and I read it, and once I play the new game that comes, I'll have some further thoughts. But for now, I'm just happy to see new blood in my favorite series. Thank you guys for coming to hang out with me. This channel has been a lot of fun since I decided to start talking about games that I think matter to the greater scope of the industry. And these videos have been a lot of fun to make lately. So let me know what games you guys want to see make a comeback and what your thoughts are with everything going on with Legacy of Kain franchise right now. Let me know what old dormant franchises you'd like to see make a comeback. And hit the like and the sub if you haven't already, if you enjoyed the vid. And I'll see you guys in the next one. All right, I'm out. Toodaloo. See you guys. Ciao.
The Hilden. The Hilden. Hilden.
The lousy Hilton.
Hilden.
Hello.
Hilden. Hilden. The Hilden.
Hilden, how you
Hilden. 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 Hey, Hilden.